All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and if we could have Giovanni lead us in the pledge. Welcome everybody to the January regular meeting of the District 94 Board of Education. Mission statement, please.
Community high school strives to promote and provide growth experiences in learning, leadership, and living.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Here. Mr. Ramos.
Present by phone due to medical reasons.
Ms. Munoz. Present. Mr. Nagel.
Present.
Mr. Singh.
Present by phone for medical reasons.
Mr. Speaker. Here.
Okay. Any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, that brings us to good news of the district. College Board National Recognition Program Scholar. Well done, Robert. That brings us to public participation. This is the portion of our meeting where any member of the public can address the Board of Education on any topic. Presentations are limited to no more than 5 minutes per person, with a total time limit of 30 minutes for public participation. Due to legislative restrictions on what boards can or cannot comment on, the board does not engage in a dialogue during public participation, but will listen to concerns and, where appropriate, direct the administration to follow up. At this point, is there anyone who wishes to participate in public comment? All right. Hearing none, we will move on, and that brings us to Superintendent's report.
Well, good evening. A few items to share with the board tonight. The first one is with regards to FOIAs. District received one FOIA request. That request was from ABC 7 Chicago for copies of documentation of remote learning equipment reported as missing, damaged, broken, stolen, or otherwise not available for use. The total number of remote learning equipment assigned and other information related to the use of that equipment. The second item I wanted to share with the board is in regards to an article in Daily Herald. If you recall, at the October board meeting, I provided a brief update on the staffing shortage in the state. Today, the Daily Herald published an article about the continued staffing shortage, which included a regional breakdown of the data collected. Data was gathered from a survey issued by the Illinois Association of Regional Superintendents of Schools. 78% of the districts in Illinois participated in that survey, which is a high percentage. So that's about, it's over 650 districts out of the 852 districts in Illinois. I wanted to highlight a couple of interesting findings tonight from that article. Overall, 88% of districts said that they had a shortage of full-time teachers, and 96% said that they had a shortage of substitute teachers. When separating the results by regions, 89% of rural districts, 88% of suburban districts, and 85% of urban districts reported teacher shortage issues. The second part that I wanted to highlight was the shortage in the state as relates to qualified candidates. So the survey asked districts about their hiring pool, and 90% of rural districts, 87% of suburban districts, and 80% of urban districts indicated that it was a challenge for them to have a highly qualified candidate pool in the hiring process. What's striking about the survey data is that this problem is truly a statewide problem without the typical disparities that you see between regions. So usually you'll find that the suburbs versus the urban areas and rural areas are very disparate, but that's not with this data. So I will share this article with the board in my update this week. The last item I want to share with the board is in regards to the summer summit. At the December board meeting, I indicated that I was working on a plan to create a summer conference or summit between District 94 and ascending districts for the purpose of creating greater alignment with programs, procedures, curriculum, etc. I've touched base with each of the superintendents from our ascending district, Jim Wool from District 25, Christina Davis from 33, and Matt Rich from 34, and they have all agreed that this will be a valuable opportunity and are excited for this conference. So this speaks to the great collaboration and articulation that has been evident over the last couple of years between all of us, which is tremendous. And we are targeting the end of June for this conference to occur. And that concludes my report.
Thank you for that report. That brings us to Director of Business Services report.
Thank you. First off, facility plan that is scheduled to start tomorrow. So we have Bill Templin coming into the building, and we'll be sitting down with Dr. Chang, Dr. Dwyer, maintenance people, and starting that process. Second thing on my list is in an effort to try and increase the district's interest earned, I've been working with PMA and Fifth Third Bank to see what options are available. As we have been reviewing the options, we have been keeping the overall goal in mind, which is to invest as much as possible while ensuring we always have enough cash to cover monthly expenses for payroll and accounts payable. Based on the district's fund balances and monthly cash flow, the administration is confident we can move $2 million from our current money market accounts to treasury bonds. Both PMA and Fifth Third noted that the treasury bonds are the best current option, as those rates are better than any CD rates currently on the market. Both offered rates for treasury bonds at different maturity lengths, such as 1 year, 18 months, 2 years, all the way up to 3 years. Both suggested a laddered strategy, investing $250,000 or $500,000, having a portion maturing every 6 months. At that time of maturity, we can determine if we continue investing or if we need to put that amount back into our cash flow. The laddered strategy that they suggested should help to minimize the risk of the market going up and down as the rates are locked in for this specified time period. The estimated interest earned over the 3 years on this $2 million is about $38,000. If we did nothing and kept the $2 million in our money market account, that same $2 million would earn about $2,000. As of this morning, Fifth Third provided the best rates in return, so unless there's any concerns from the board, we'll look to move that $2 million into treasury bonds with Fifth Third Bank sometime this week. If there's no questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. That brings us to Director of Human Services report.
All right. First, I'd like to update the board on the impact of the new wave of COVID on our staffing. We did see a major influx of staff absences as well as student absences related to COVID. And this was in addition to our regular daily absences in the week following our return from winter break. While it has been a bit of a strain on our system, we were fortunate to be able to provide adequate coverage, the majority of which was external. We're now seeing some relief in that due to the updated ISB IDPH guidance that has reduced the exclusion period from 10 days to 5 days. And we're also already seeing a decrease in new cases, so those are all positive trends. I also have to commend the staff, not only for their quick reporting and open communication, but also their willingness to jump in and assist as has been needed. In addition, I wanted to update the board that we are now in the initial stages of the sectioning process. Following our standard timeline, I anticipate that a staffing recommendation for 22-23 will be brought to the Board of Education for consideration in March. And finally, You'll remember that during the November board meeting, the Board of Education accepted the retirement of Beth Hunter, our MIS supervisor, effective August 31st, 2022. Beth plays an invaluable role behind the scenes in the district, processing data, compiling statistics, completing state reporting, supporting network applications, and guiding the sectioning and scheduling process. We can all appreciate the extent to which we rely on the MIS supervisor in the day-to-day operations of the district. Now, the transition of this role will be critical due to the nuance of her position. As such, the MIS supervisor position will be posted this week, available immediately, with the hope of bringing a recommended candidate to the board as soon as possible and allowing for the greatest possible overlap in transition time. So this is how I'll plan to proceed, barring any concerns from the board today. And that concludes my report.
Thank you for that. That brings us to principal's report.
Thank you. Typically, I like to spend this time sharing all the positive highlights from the previous month, and while there are many, I do want to tonight focus more on some of the procedural changes that are going to impact WeGo going forward. So, in regard to COVID procedures, as you may know by now, the Illinois Department of Public Health and the State Board of Education released guidance, well, I should say they revised their guidance for K-12 schools regarding COVID-19 procedures. What I can tell you is that there are many positives, especially those that allow us to keep staff and students in school or let them return to school more quickly than previously. So those have been positive aspects. However, what I can share is that the guidance also creates more layers of time and people-intensive resources when it comes to mitigating. With changing definitions of fully vaccinated for students and the use of the test to stay protocol, our health office, which was already bearing an incredibly large amount of new work this year, will be taking on more responsibility because the tracking of students and calculating their timeline for return and monitoring that has become much more complicated and nuanced. Let me give you just some brief examples. Determining full vaccination is now much more difficult. Previously, it was just if you had 2 shots of Moderna or Pfizer or 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson. Now, we have to check student age, determine when their second shot of a vaccine was given to determine whether or not they're over 18 and whether or not they are booster eligible in regard to the window from their second shot to their booster shot. If they are booster eligible but not boosted, then we follow one side of the decision tree. If they are fully boosted, we follow another. Another complicating factor is that while students who test positive for COVID-19 can return 5 days after testing positive, we now have to follow very strict guidelines during days 6 through 10 of their return and testing them. So again, it puts another layer of tracking and resources on our health office. The complications again continue for close contacts. While we can now allow a fully vaccinated student to remain in school after a close contact at school, we now need to administer a test 5 days after their exposure, which creates another group of students we have to separately track for an additional week. And additionally, while we're excited about using test to stay protocol, so a student who is a close contact but may not be fully vaccinated, we can test them at regular intervals to keep them in school. It is the requirements are stringent. It puts a tremendous amount of work on our health office. It could quickly exhaust our supplies of rapid tests, and it is only available for exposures during the school day. So if you're exposed at home, in the community, or even at a school-sponsored extracurricular activity, test to stay is not applicable. And the guidelines are very clear about that. These are just a few of the examples of complexity that we've encountered just after synthesizing through the new guidance. I'm sure there will be other complications that no one has anticipated yet. And in all likelihood, the guidance is going to continue to change and evolve. In many ways, it does feel like we're back in July of 2020. In response to these new changes, we are shifting internal resources to give more support in the form of people to the health office while they navigate these changes. Also, after filtering through the new and at times conflicting guidelines, we have been able to synthesize the cogent takeaways. And just before this meeting, communication went out to our entire community, as well as our staff, with changes to our procedures in the form of frequently asked questions and their answers, as well as a flow chart that families can use. Everything was translated in English and Spanish. And I'll continue to update the board on the changes as well as the challenges that we encounter as we take on these new additional responsibilities. What I can tell you, and echo what Julie mentioned, the staff has been tremendous. They have jumped in, and the health office has been great too, and we just continue to support them. Also on the lines of staffing and that process, as we are now in the second semester, we are firmly in that place where we have a foot in this year and a foot in next year. So as Julie mentioned, we are in the midst of students making their course requests for next year, and those requests allow us to create our master schedule for the following year. That in turn helps us make recommendations to the board for staffing for next school year. This process takes place at the March Board of Ed meeting. This year, we are also working intensively to understand not just the needs of our current students, but also our future Wildcats. So as we examine and understand those needs, I want the board to know that we are working to create some really significant and new staffing recommendations using the ESSER federal funds available to us so we can find some impactful and effective ways to support students. I'm looking forward to our upcoming meetings as we more explicitly lay out to the board the recommendations for additional programming that the administration is working on. For your information, though, we are focusing on core graduation requirements, social emotional well-being that engages both parents and students in the process, and we're looking for ways that additional staffing in key areas can fill some identified gaps. Related to our changes to our COVID procedures, I'm also happy to update the board that we have been able to add some capacity to our academic coaching model. We got a little creative and we went through our Rolodex and we were able to tap some former teachers. Now, not retired teachers. I have to say, pretty much every retired teacher from WeGo who wants to work is working at WeGo already in one form or another. But we tapped some former teachers who stepped away from WeGo for family obligations over the past few years. And they were very excited and willing for this flexible model of academic coaching to come in and help. So we're fortunate to add their capacity, 2 of whom are bilingual in Spanish. 1 is bilingual in French. I don't know if that's going to help us very much, but we'll see. And so we're really fortunate to have that, and we're incorporating them into that system of support right now. I also want to update the board on the expansion of our tutoring program to give a little bit of context. In years past, we've offered tutoring after school 3 days a week with 2 teachers, 1 math and 1 English. This year, we've been able to expand that pretty significantly, where we have 5 to 6 teachers each day, 2 math, 2 English, and 1 to 2 special education teachers, 4 days a week. So the expansion is going from about a $10,000 a year program to what will be over a $20,000 program this year. So we're really excited about that. And the expansion, again, is in thanks to our ESSER funding. It's been a big support for the school year. Finally, I really want to give a big thank you to our entire school community and really including our feeder schools. So this week we had our 8th grade step-up night. That was on Wednesday the 12th this past week. And we were really worried that we would not have very many people here for obvious reasons. And the turnout was tremendous. And I have to say that we did tweak not only the ways that we advertised it, but also the ways that we presented the information. And we incorporated students into the main presentations. They co-presented along with our administrative team. And it was incredibly well received, very meaningful. The takeaways were great. It was a fantastic night. The place was jammed in good ways. We were able to space out. We used our 4 largest venues in the building for your reference, but everyone moved through it very well. We got a lot of positive feedback. And it was tremendous that our feeder schools were able to support us in advertising so well too. And as always, you have the attendance and discipline reports in your packet. And if you don't have any questions, that concludes my report.
Quick question you may or may not be able to answer. I'm glad to hear that you found some additional people to be resources for the academic coaching. Do you know yet if you have enough, or are we still in need of more?
Hard to say. So we're in the early days of the semester, obviously. So as the semester goes on, we're going to have a better understanding of what are the academic needs of the students based on a couple of things. One are going to be the grade reviews, who's struggling, who's not struggling. The second is going to be the kids who are out with COVID, either due to positive cases or close contact. We do try to prioritize those kids and connect them with an academic coach if they don't feel like they can do that. The communication that went out just before this meeting did include an FAQ on that and who to contact and how to access that resource if you need it. At this point, I really have stopped making predictions about what's going to happen next, because I just end up looking foolish. So I hope this will be enough need that we can meet it, but I would hate to give any guarantees.
Well, if you could keep us appraised of where we stand as far as, are we meeting the needs, or are there still needs that we can't quite meet, that we should know, for sure.
And then, can I just clarify, so you're hiring 2 more academic coaches, and we already have 5 to 6 that are staying after school, I think, or did I misunderstand?
I probably was inarticulate. So we have 5 to 6 after-school tutors, 5 days a week. Academic coaching is really different. So the tutors really focus on, hey, you're struggling with math, let me help you with this concept. The academic coaches are, hey, I got your grades pulled up, you're missing 3 assignments here, 4 assignments there. Let's connect with Mrs. So-and-so from English. Okay, when are you going to be back in school? All right, it's more about executive functioning connectivity, if that makes sense. The academic coaches aren't always going to be able to help them with a content area. So they're 2 separate support systems. So, yeah, I was probably conflated together, Lynn, I apologize.
So when we hire these, we'll have to.
So,
the ones we have.
Well, all our staff are able, they are welcome to do it. We pay them a curriculum rate. So we have some who are able, our staff capacity to do so really diminished throughout last semester. But now we have 3 folks who were former WeGo teachers in the very recent past, and they are now able to do it flexibly on their time. And since a lot of the kids we're reaching out to are going to be at home for medical reasons, they're able to work those times out very flexibly. A lot of moving pieces. My head spins too every day, don't worry.
One question I just want to ask about the 8th grade graduate, the 8th grade
Step up night.
Step
And
up
for the
night,
record,
sorry.
step up night is my term, so I probably said something that it isn't. So if I confuse you, that's on me.
No, not at all. I just wanted to ask, do we have any opportunity for the feeder districts to set up tables or have something that have programs that could possibly feed into the high school in continuation to what they've been doing at their district, or do we have any counselors that reach out in that capacity and offer that, kind of continuation of those programs for the high school? Have we ever done that in the past, or are we looking to do something like that?
If I don't answer correctly, check me out. So I think I understand, but I do want to make sure. So the night itself is really about the high school, and it's about those kids just being here with the high school staff, high school counselors, and having that opportunity. What is going on in the background, has been going on all last week and this week as well too, is our counseling staff and our division chairs are meeting with classes of kids to talk about the electives at their schools. Now, in the case of Lehman, the previous weekend, that was remote. That was a remote experience. But we're pushing in where the 8th graders are at. So in terms of that night of are you asking if Lehman, Winfield, Benjamin are setting up tables here?
No, I'm wondering if programming that could possibly feed into, in continuation from our districts that feed into the high school, if there's anything that we do kind of to connect with the feeder programs or the feeder districts that are in community high school, as far as on 8th grade, the walkthrough or whatever, the 8th grade thing.
So the night of, not as much, no, because that night really is about the transition to high school only. But what we are very meticulous about is if you are a student in Abatement in 8th grade, we're connecting those students way through multiple class visits, but also the course recommendation process. So when they meet with a counselor, we see what they're involved in, what they have, and then we're connecting that. And then that's also the articulation that's already happening amongst the division chairs here at the high school with the administrators who are the liaisons for those programs at the middle schools. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So I just was thinking as far as clubs or activities that we could, and that might be something that, at the summer that we could maybe start to talk about it, or maybe be worthwhile to kind of get to that.
Yeah, and let me add to that too. So that's 8th grade open house. Yep, that's what we had.
That's what we just had
a week ago.
Yep.
And that really is an open house, as Will described it. So it's just come see what the school's about, see what we have to offer. Then what typically happens in the spring later on is we do have step-up days. And in the past, those were days where we had students from the middle school come to the high school. And they met with our ambassadors, met with counselors, met with various people, and then we ran them through an abbreviated schedule. They got to pop in some classes, eat in our commons and have lunch, to which they always raved about. And then we sent them back to school. The challenge has been, and we've been trying to reach out to 33 because District 25, they can send their 90 students to us. We can manage that during the day. Winfield, when they send their 40 students to us, not a problem. 33 sends us 400 kids, or that's how many they have. And each time we've reached out to 33 in the past, it's just been super complicated with that large number. However, I do know that last week, Christina Davis texted me, and she said we would really like to make efforts to see if we can do step-up days, where 33 does send, Lehman Middle School sends groups of kids over, and so I told her we would reach out, have our administration contact theirs again to see if there is some planning, but it is massive. You have 400 some kids that you want to bring over. And then to move ahead, when we have our We Go In with Pride Day, which is our first day of school, all the freshman students run through various sessions. One of them is specific to athletics and activities. And in that session, we tell the kids, here's how you can get some clubs started if you have certain interests that you want to get going. So Mark Wolf walks them through that in terms of just how to get things going, because we have a variety of kids with a huge variety of interests. And then the last piece is we do administer a freshman survey with regards to their interests and needs in the beginning as well. Now, obviously, COVID set everything back, within the last year and a half. But those were activities all meant to bridge that gap, and that's definitely something that we can throw into as a topic for the summer summit. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and we're excited to hear that there is that interest again from Lehman Middle School, because it is complicated, and each time that we've reached out in the past, honestly, it was hard for the administration at Lehman to figure out how to make that work without taking literally a couple, 3 weeks to rotate all the kids through, because we would not be able to accommodate another 400 kids all at once. It would have to be split up somehow. And the reality is, it may look different than the step-up days for District 25 and 34 if we want to make it both manageable in terms of not spreading it out too far into the year and take a month and kind of compact it versus not having too many kids here because we can't handle that many in commons, especially now with COVID parameters. But it's nice, so we will definitely reach out again to see if we can get that going. Sure. Yep.
Okay, that brings us to Epsilon Data Management Abatement Proposal.
Thank you. On January 6th, the City of West Chicago received a request from a broker representing Epsilon Data Management, who purchased Aspen Marketing on North Avenue in 2011. They would like to consolidate their 2 locations and are considering one of the present locations, which is in Illinois or Missouri, or a totally new location. This request is a little different from the other abatement requests, as if it isn't approved, we could lose the current business that we have, which employs over 100 people, as well as resulting in a large vacant building along North Avenue. They also have a rather aggressive deadline, which is January 21st. Michael Gutman from West Chicago asked all entities if they would consider providing an abatement, knowing that he couldn't get the formal approval from all taxing entities by their deadline. District administration noted that the District 94 would consider their request. Michael Gutman is recommending that the taxing entities consider a 50% partial tax abatement over the next 10 years, and that a tax abatement analysis will be prepared. Once we have the analysis in hand, we plan to bring the request to the board for approval, which is likely in February. Until then, we just wanted to ensure that the board was aware of the request and that we would consider it. Any questions?
Thank
What
you.
was the length again?
The length, it'd be for 10 years.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's property tax. Correct.
Then we have to make that decision by when, the 21st, but we're going to talk about it.
So Michael Gutman's sending that message back to them saying like he can't get it done by the 21st. But as long as he has at least a option that from every one of the taxing entities that they'll consider it, he felt comfortable going back to them and saying that everybody's going to consider it. Here are some of the things that we can do until then. But so I'm guessing that they'll get that back to us pretty quickly. That's why I'm guessing it'll be February.
Thank you.
So I guess the one option would be we extend the tax abatement with the hope that they stay and keep people employed. The alternate is if they move out, somebody else may move in and continue to pay taxes. So it's not kind of an all or nothing thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a possibility if they move out that it'd be vacant for a period of time. Not sure how long it'd be, and they'd probably offer somebody else a tax abatement for somebody else to move into that building.
Okay, is that the way we're attracting people to get in at this point? I mean, we could lose the taxes. Well, if it's property tax, whoever owns that building is going to continue to pay taxes, whether it's vacant or not. Right? Unless they were to tear it down, we'd still be getting taxes.
True.
Different rate.
It is a different rate. Here.
But would it be the half losing in the abatement?
I'm not sure what that different tax rate is. It also, if they do decide to consolidate, then it would be another building that they're adding on, which is also would bring another 100 jobs.
Do we know how many of those employees that they currently have are local? Out of curiosity.
We do not have that information. I can request that we get that information, I suppose. I'm not sure if they would provide it.
Any other questions at this point? All right, thank you for the heads up on that. And that brings us to committee and representative reports. Any update regarding SACIT? Okay, that brings us to future dates. We have a committee of the whole meeting on February 1st, a regular Board of Education meeting on February 15th, a committee of the whole meeting on March 1st, and a regular Board of Education meeting on March 15th. And that brings us to open comment by board members. Any open comments? Hearing none, that brings us to future issues. Are there any future issues that board members would like to have addressed?
Yeah, curious about our commitment to board books. I ran into an alternative to board books at the conference, and I'm wondering if you're interested in having a discussion about looking for a better option. I'm not particularly happy with board books, and they continue to supposedly improve it, and it seems like it's getting worse.
We can certainly look into that. I mean, we've talked about it, Cheryl and I, over the years, especially when they transferred or moved to Board Book Premier. That seemed to really impact a lot of the features found in Board Book, and their sustaining of the legacy models was not great either. Board Doc is the other vendor that does a lot of work with archiving and maintaining boards. Yeah, so we can certainly look into that and see if that would be a better option for us. I'd be happy to do that.
Any other future issues? All right, that brings us to consent agenda. Are there any items that anybody wishes removed from the consent agenda for separate action? Hearing none, I would move approval of the consent agenda, which includes approval of minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting December 21st, 2021, closed session Board of Education meeting December 21st, 2021, as well as approval of financials, which includes approved current expenditures, impressed fund statement, treasurer's report, statement of position / financial report, statement of revenue and expenditures year-to-date ending December 31st, 2021, 3-year budget and / actual report, grant reports, petty cash fund report, student activity account fund balance, new vendors monthly report, quarterly financial reports, board conference travel expenses, and the personnel report as presented. Is there a second? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ramos.
Aye.
Munoz. Mr. Daigle.
Aye.
Mr. Say.
Aye.
Mr. Suniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
All right then, that brings us to new business, addition of administrative position.
Yeah, I'm excited to bring this recommendation to the board, and just for setting context. And I shared with the board the email that I sent to all staff with regards to this, but I think it's worth repeating. This is a position meant to really bolster, the effects of it bolsters the dean's office with the move of Veronica Jimenez-Winton to oversee the dean's office, given her experience working with parents and helping students transition from various cultural backgrounds. And she will be maintaining the Director of Bilingual Services department as well. However, the world languages position will be shifted over to Jenna Wind. Jenna Wind taught Spanish for 10 years and Spanish 1, 2, 3 levels, as well as organized trips abroad. Mr. Martino will still remain as the Assistant Principal of Administrative Services. So in addition to his duties with evaluating of teachers and helping Dr. Dwyer with the principal initiatives of overseeing the division heads, helping with the improvement plans with that, as well as overseeing the sectioning process and a lot of the nuances with regards to initiatives that Dr. Dwyer has brought on, whether those are student groups or the student support initiative. He will also take on the added responsibilities from Mr. Olberg's position, which is the facility and operations pieces. As such, with the moving of Veronica and Jenna over to world languages, there's a need to request for an additional administrative position to maintain the 2 deans that we have going next year. And the really exciting piece is that should the board approve that, that dean's position will be posted with a social work or school counseling background required, and then a strongly preferred bilingual Spanish listed in the job posting. And that was something that I talked to Ms. Jimenez-Winton about, and that is to list that with a bilingual Spanish strongly preferred, so that it strengthens the candidate pool. Because oftentimes you may have individuals who are good in Spanish, but they don't consider themselves to be bilingual per se, and so it helps to broaden that a little bit. But that is the recommendation for the additional administrative position.
The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the addition of 1 administrative position for Dean of Students beginning with the 2022 to 2023 school year.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I just have a question, Julie. How was this received with the staff, teachers?
Frankly, we haven't received a whole lot of feedback from the teachers, which I guess we could consider no news good news in this case. I think the explanation was really helpful. We've definitely heard that need coming from staff for additional SEL support and really meeting those student needs, especially in the transition to high school.
Lynn, I can share that the impacted administrators, the ones who will be shifting around or taking on some new responsibilities, have gotten a lot of warm wishes and all this is great, and we could have you either as a member of this department or glad someone's going to be focusing on film blank. So we have gotten some of that echo.
Okay, good. That's very good to hear, because I started thinking about it later after we've had discussions about this. It's one thing for how I see it, it's another thing for how the staff perceives it when people are moved around. I mean, in my job, when people are moved around, everybody talks in the background. So I'm glad that you're getting feedback, or no feedback even.
Well, and I shared with the board an email that I received last night that spoke very positively from a
Good.
veteran teacher, actually within a bilingual department, and just really thrilled about
Yeah.
the opportunity.
Good. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
I was going to say, I love the position. I think it's an awesome position. I guess my hesitancy is just like I want to know more information about how we can help this move forward and make sure that they're going to be successful.
Yeah, that transition will definitely occur with Mr. Martino and Ms. Wint in the following year because they're still in the building. And that's I guess the advantage of this plan is these are all people who have been in the building for a while. So their support, they know each other and their support of each other is there. So that will definitely occur as we transition through the summer. So it's not like they're off and gone. They'll definitely be around to help support and transition.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Ms. Munoz. Mr. Daigle.
Aye.
Mr. Sig.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
I want some more information.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Mr. Amos.
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to separation of employment. The recommended motion, the Board of Education approve the following. The resignation of, I'm going to try this, Patrick Shaka, Technician/Technology Division, effective January 21st, 2022. Is there a motion? Second? Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Daigle.
Aye.
Mr. Sig.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Mr. Amos.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz.
At this point, I will move that we postpone action on the resignation of Kara Shukulik until after tonight's executive session. Is there a second? I don't think we need a roll call for that. All those in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, we will come back to that after exec session. That brings us to 457 plan documents and adoption agreement. Can you tell us briefly?
Sure. To provide staff with additional retirement saving option, administration is recommending the 457 plan through Omni, the district's current 403B provider. So this 457 plan will provide a different option for staff aside from that the new TRS supplemental plan that was approved at the December board meeting.
The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the 457 plan and adoption agreement as presented. Is there a second? Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Mr. Amos.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz. Mr. Daigle.
Aye.
Mr. Sig.
Aye.
All right, that brings us to 403B, amended adoption agreement.
To mirror the 457 plan that is approved, Omni, the district's current 403B provider, recommended amending the 403B plan to include a ROP option for the staff to contribute as well. The administration thought that was a good idea, so no other changes were made to the adoption agreement. It's here for approval.
The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the 403B adoption agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sig.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Mr. Amos.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz. Mr. Daigle.
Aye.
That brings us to Chromebooks for 2022 to 2023.
Each year, the district purchases Chromebooks for incoming freshmen, and along with some replacements and backup Chromebooks, along with the Google Chrome education licenses. This year, Dell Technologies provided the best pricing. We also received pricing from CDW, TRA, and Insight. And so the total cost of the Chromebooks is $211,945.50, which is budgeted this current fiscal year.
The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the Dell Chromebook purchase and Google Chrome education licenses from Dell Technologies not to exceed $211,945.50.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm just curious, how much are the licenses? Or is that included in the purchase of the equipment?
It's included in the purchase. I think it's like $31 per unit off the top of my head. I can get you that. Looking for a ball. Yeah.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Aye. Mr. Ramos.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz. Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Singh.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye. That brings us to desktop computers for digital art class.
The current desktop computers that we have in the digital art class are at least 7 years old. The video card is really starting to lag on some of those computers, and so new computers with updated video cards were requested. Bob took a look at it already and decided that it really needed updating. So we got 3 quotes from CDW, Insight, and Dell. Dell again provides the best pricing at $41,730. And this purchase will actually be funded through the digital equity grant.
The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the Dell desktop computers purchase from Dell Technologies not to exceed $41,730.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ramos.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz. Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Singh.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Aye.
That brings us to textbook display.
Each year I bring forward a list of new textbooks that we will display publicly for 3 weeks, at the end of which we would then come forward for approval to adopt for the following school year. And in your packet, you've got a list along with the rationale of the textbooks that we would like to adopt for next school year.
The recommended motion is that the Board of Education authorize the administration to advise the public via website that textbooks recommended for adoption will be on display for 21 days. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Munoz. Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Singh.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Mr. Ramos.
Aye.
All right, that brings us to approval of tentative 2022 to 2023 school calendar.
Yeah, let me just set the context really briefly here. The calendar that's in the packet basically is the major pieces of the holidays and the start of the school year. It does not include the half days or late starts yet because that is contingent upon the student support initiative. So most likely the board will have an action item later on in the school year for modifying the school calendar. But this helps with the parents if they want to set vacations and understand just how this coordinates with districts, other feeder districts and their calendars.
Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the tentative 2022 to 2023 school calendar. Does our proposed calendar mesh well with the districts surrounding us?
No, it does conflict or not conflict. It is still out of sync, and that is one of the topics for the summit, but as an example, I know 33 has still some construction projects that are occurring. So if I'm not mistaken, I think their start of the school year still is closer in September. Is that correct, for next year? And that's due to the construction process. But relative to the other districts, it's tighter that way. So that is a topic for discussion.
So it's the intent to, wherever possible, to try to have some linkage, because obviously that makes it easier for families.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Nagel.
right, that takes care of the open session material. We will be going into executive session, and there will be action taken after executive session. I would move that we go into executive session for the purposes of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, also for collective negotiating matters, also for litigation when an action against, affecting, on, or behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. Is there a second? Roll call, please.
Mr. Singh.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga. Aye. Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer. Aye. Mr. Amos.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz. Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Okay, we will be going into executive session. Let's take a 5-minute break. Oh, I see the red light, so that we get us live again on
That is correct.
YouTube. Okay. There is a camera hanging from the white thing with the red light.
That's the camera.
Well, maybe.
Oh, up there.
Yeah, up there, hanging from the ceiling.
And this is the makeshift, the black tube hanging down from the ceiling right above like the phone here. That's our patch for a microphone right now, since we didn't get our mic equipment in.
So the podium, that's just the microphone for public
Correct. Yep.
participation.
Yep.
All right, and just as a reminder to everybody, since we're going down this streaming thing and it's new for everybody, it's more important than ever that we try to always use the mics when we're talking, because even if people in the room hear us, it might not carry well on the stream, so we want people to be able to follow as best they can.
Are you tied into the microphone, or just louder than microphone?
Right. For right now, it sounds like going forward they're going to tie it in.
Correct.
For right now, it's just picking up the ambient sound. All right then, being back in open session and getting back to the separation of employment, the recommended motion is that the Board of Education not accept the resignation of Kara Kroshalik, Social Worker, Student Education Division, effective January 3rd, 2022. So to be very clear, the motion is to not accept, meaning that a vote of yes means do not accept. Would someone care to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Zuniga.
Yes, I accept.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz. Ms. Casey Mayer. Mr. Amos.
Aye.
Mr. Singh.
Aye.
Okay then, there being no more business to come before the board, would someone care to motion for adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, we are done.